Hello guys and welcome back to my sewing room. It's really nice to have you guys here. Today I am doing a really fun project. It is inspired by Anna in Frozen 2. I really love her travel dress. I love the movie overall, let's be honest, but her travel dress when they're venturing out, I like the color palette, I like the details. I think it's so cool and I would like to make that into a corset. I have bought some fabric. I have this mustard color linen, this black wool, and I bought cotil. I've never bought cotil before because I struggled to find it in Norway, so I had to order it from abroad. I'm gonna use the cotil for the inner fabric and I'm gonna use these two for the outer fabric. So her dress has a lot of details that I'm gonna try to embroider on and we'll see how that goes. The pattern for this, I will start off using a sort of mix of different patterns that I've used previously. Emma Breeze and Freedom Corset, I've sort of mixed those two together to have a longer corset and still have the details of the shoulder straps and the ties and everything. But I want to base this sort of on national Norwegian garment called bunad, where they have these tabs on the vests of those garments. So I'm going to try to emulate that in a way. So a lot of things I think I'll figure those out as we go along. So I just really want to take you guys along with me. I really want to thank everyone who's subscribing to this channel. If you want to, and you like the things that I'm making, it's super helpful if you will subscribe. And if you'd like to leave a like below, that's also great. So without further ado, let's just jump in and see how this turns out. So I started off by just sketching to see what kind of shape I wanted it to have, what kind of details I wanted, the fabric I wanted to use, which one I wanted where. I went a bit back and forth on this. So some things that I wanted to do initially, I changed my mind on. These panels in the side is one of them, and the embroidery in the front. I also decided not to have the piping in the seam. This is maybe one of the decisions that I sort of regret because I like the piping effect across the princess seam and the others for that matter. But it turned out being a bit difficult to combine with the bias binding along the lower edge, I found. So this is sort of close to what I ended up with. Embroidery in the back and then a panel on the center front. I'm gonna divide this panel into two because I want this mustard strip at the front here as a sort of a band. So I'm gonna join two parts together, one black and one of the mustard linen. So I'm just dividing it here and making seam allowance, and then I'm going to do the same afterwards with the rest of this panel. What I'm doing now is just accounting for the fact that I'm not going to sew the pieces right side out and turn them out, so I will need this seam allowance. I'm gonna use bias binding instead, so I have to take out a bit of the width here. I'm gonna start off by just cutting the back panel so that I can fully embroider that before doing anything else, because I think I really want to get that done before doing any sewing. So the back panel is cut on a fold. I'm gonna try to do a test in terms of the embroidery on her dress. There are two types of embroidery. There is one main embroidery and there is one which is more like a pattern for the skirt. And I think I'm mainly gonna do the one that is used as a pattern for the skirt. In part because it has just one color embroidery as far as I can tell. And also I like the circles that are also used in this embroidery. So I'm gonna try to sketch it out, and then I'm gonna try to do a test embroidery using this thread. This is not a color that I envision myself using for anything else in the future, so that is mainly the reason why I'm gonna do this for the test. This should be more like out. It's not terribly wrong, it's just a bit off in terms of proportions. So if you can see here, it should have been a bit more squished in a way. Okay, I think we're getting there in terms of the shape. So I'm gonna draw out the other side and then I'm gonna start to embroider and see if we get the correct lines and everything. Now I have to say that embroidery is not something I'm proficient in at all. I've done like a few tests basically, so don't use this as a tutorial for embroidery because that is not what I'm good at. But what I'm gonna do here is just like a satin stitch, which is like filling in basically with straight stitches. Now this is basically just a test to see if I can realistically do the embroidery on this corset or if I should just not. Because if it ends up looking really bad, it's better not to, I think. But running the risk of sounding too optimistic too soon, but I think this could work. Okay, so I just finished these two parts of the embroidery. I think it looks kind of nice, and I really want to have the embroidered effect rather than achieving the pattern in some other way. So the next part will be to actually do this on the fabric in question with the colors. So I'm doing this side in this color, and I'm doing a lighter color on the other side. So I'm just trying to start off this side, and hopefully I'll be able to mirror it nicely on the other side. What I've decided to do at this point, because I'm finding it a bit difficult to embroider the wool material, I have made this grid in Procreate and drawn out the pattern there. I'm going to transfer that to a piece of interfacing to get the outline of the pattern, so individual petals and so on. I'm going to iron it onto the back panel using interfacing. I know that there are materials you can put on that washes away when you embroider, but I'm just gonna do this now because this is what I have on hand and I'm hoping that'll work well enough. But if you have like links for that type of material, please let me know in the comments and I will look into that later. If you think that it's weird that I'm just spacing it out so much, it's because I usually find it's easier to maintain the same angle of all the threads if I first do this and then go back and fill it out more. So here is the mustard colored fabric that I have. I also have this embroidery thread, but I'm gonna cut out the pattern piece of the front. In this fabric, I'm gonna mark out how I want the pattern to be placed on this strip, and then I'm gonna try to embroider it on. Alright, so I have marked the area we have at our disposal for the embroidery. So what I think I'm gonna do is have one of these diamond shapes in between each grommet, and then do this zigzag from kind of grommet to grommet in a way. Maybe keeping it away from the actual middle row like this, and then a diamond shape in the middle here. Kind of like this. I'm guessing like this on her outfit is meant to be like a fabric where the pattern is sort of woven into the fabric itself and not embroidered like this, but I do not have a loom and I am not proficient in weaving, so that wasn't really an alternative for this project. As you can see in a lot of like national traditional outfits and so on, you have a lot of woven bands and stuff like that used in the outfits, and I feel like this would sort of be that, and if this was like an original outfit. So before I do anything else, I am going to sew the two front panels together, two parts of the front panel. I have cheated and started on this side. So I just done like a split stitch with the pattern with a slightly more reddish thread. I'm gonna think about that and do this in the meantime. Okay, so I've changed my mind about the embroidery of the front. Anyway, I've been so back and forth on this, but I tried a different approach for the embroidery. Instead of doing the satin stitch that way, I did it this way, and I just feel like it was a lot more tidy, and also incorporating this back stitch towards the black fabric. I'm not gonna do it on this side though. I'm just gonna do it on the one towards the edge, because there will be grommets in between here and there will be lacing going over here. Will be a lot happening here. I made a decision recently to add a tad more embroidery that's not necessarily accurate to the inspiration, but I just felt like connecting these diamond shapes to this zigzag shape. So in order to do that, I just sort of made this connecting back stitch. I see on this one, this side, I did a worse job in terms of making this a straight line. You can definitely see that this side has straighter lines. I'm gonna let it slide because I don't think in the end it will be that visible. Here you guys can see I've sewn the boning onto the back panel of the coutil. I'm just pinning the first panel, the couture layer, to the back here, right sides together, and then I'm gonna pin the wool layer on this side afterwards and sandwich them together. I'm gonna base this layer before I pin the other, just to make it a bit easier to work with. To avoid a sharp bulk, what I usually do is that I trim the top and bottom layer more than those in between, so you get more like a gradient seam allowance instead of just a sharp edge. So as you guys can see here, I just have a slight shorter seam allowance on the bottom and top layer, and I just feel like that gives it a bit of a flatter finish on the inside of the garment. I did a top stitch to just test it, and I ended up liking it a lot more than I thought I would. So I'm gonna go with the top stitching and boning channel, but I'm gonna do the boning channels last. I have just basted this side together, and I'm going to do the same on this side like I did here. Just put the 2 layers on and flip and top stitch. So at this point, all of the pieces are attached, so I'm going to put in the boning in the front here before I close these 2 pieces off and top stitch them together, in order to not have to sew boning channels through the embroidery. So I've left space in the middle here for the grommets, and the next step will be to sew the rest of the boning channels. Alrighty, so all of the boning channels are sewn. I'm just going to press the front, and I'm going to top stitch to close it off, and then I'm just going to baste around all of these bits and pieces around here. I've been doing some research and thinking in the early hours of the morning today, because yesterday I made the boning channels, and what I did was I stopped the boning channel right before this slits in the lower part, and after looking at a lot of stays and so on and just thinking about it, I think it would look better and be more stable if these boning channels continued all the way down. But what I think I'm gonna do is to keep the boning all the way down and maybe just hand sew bias binding, so that I can just take the fabric and not go all the way through. Or maybe I'm also able to, because it's Ridgeline, maybe I'm also able to just sew through it. I'm not entirely sure, but I feel like it looks weird that it stops here, and I'm not sure how it would behave if there was no boning in the lower parts. And after, as I mentioned, looking at a lot of other stays and so on, I just think that it's more correct to have it all the way down. I'm not entirely sure how to do this yet, but I'm just going to test a bit. I'm gonna trim it to get the correct length, and then I am going to just try to sew it in place. I didn't like how the boning channels got so wide, so I'm just going to hold it to the end here and try to top stitch on the outer edge of the actual boning. I put in boning and I do feel like it's kind of weird that one edge of the tabs get a lot more hold and stability than the other. So I'm going to try to put in boning on both sides of the seams. The big problem, or not problem, but challenge, is these slits, because they're really hard to sort of get around without any puckering. I just want to try, but it's going to take so long. I really want to try to do it by hand, just because it gives me a lot more control of the turns and the puckering and all that stuff. I also think that since I will do the binding by hand, I might as well go on with the boning. So I'm going to finish the boning and then do the bias binding afterwards. I have decided to do the following. On these types of corners, I sew an angle to just secure it in place on the machine. And then I fold it over and do backstitch by hand afterwards. I've done so here as well, and around these corners I have to backstitch because they're so narrow. So what I'm gonna do later on, when I'm finished with them all, is to just fold this over and sew this corner to make it lie nicer, and then trim it. This is really time consuming, so this will take a while, but it's the only way I can think of to make it look nice in the end. What I'm doing at the corners is that I'm sewing across here, and before getting so far I just mark the diagonal and I sew the diagonal, and then I turn it around and then I sew against the corner again. I'm going to do this on the machine shortly, and then I fold over and continue. I've sewn the diagonal here on this side, and then I have sewn from where the fold naturally ends and just a part down, just to get an actual crease here, because I find that easier to do on the machine than if I was to do it by hand. So when that is done, it's easier to just... There we go. So after like 3 days of almost non-stop sewing and my fingertips being completely ravished, I am done with the lower bias binding. I am relatively happy with it, considering the fact that these angles are so sharp. I had to sew it kind of like when you do a placket for a shirt. I am going to start with the upper part of the bias binding, so I just started to pin it. So after that I am going to put on the grommets along the front on both sides and do the lace up, and that should be it. Sewing, turning over, top stitching from the front. So that's it for this project. There were a lot of details here that I wasn't sure about. It was a great learning experience and I'm super happy with the results. So someone asked me the other day when I showed it to them if I was going to make something more for it. And one thing that I am considering doing with this is I would like to make a skirt for this that I could sort of just attach on the inside with hooks and eyes, for instance. So that might come up in the future. I'm not sure yet, but it could be that I'm making that in the future. I hope you guys liked this video. If you did, please leave a like below. That is so super helpful. I also hope that you guys would consider subscribing if you like the content I'm making. That is also very helpful to me, and I hope to see you guys in the next video.